Great. So again, warm welcome to Inner Fitness. Our topic today is staying light. And a lot has happened since the last time we met. But first, let's start with a reflection. I give myself a moment or two to feel very settled in this space, very present. It's almost a form of permission to the self that I don't have to think about roles or responsibilities or tasks at this time. I don't have to solve any problems or issues that might be outstanding. And just that act of giving myself permission seems to put things in perspective. I remember that the most important focus for the self is the well-being of the self. That state of well-being, that's what determines the quality of the roles, responsibilities, relationships, and issues. And so I get wonderful quality time with the self, looking at the state of my own mind, that I can understand through how I feel. My mind, my own thoughts create the feelings. So if I feel heavy, a little anxious, a little tense, a little uncertain, I can look through the window of my own thoughts to have a sense of where that feeling is coming from. And I can use the power of my own thoughts to create a different state. Really having to understand the self and the subtle ways I operate, thoughts, attitude, consciousness. That's what will help me change the way I feel from heavy, uncertain, to light, stable. Om Shanti. So, welcome again to Inner Fitness, Staying Light. Of course, when we look at outer fitness, it's this idea of physically being heavy or physically being light. It's quite an interesting topic. But before we get to that, again, so much has changed since we last met. I was going to change this picture and I did not have time. So I don't know if I can do a quick handoff to illustrate what we're about to share. So very interesting as we mark a full year, really. Thank you. A full year. I feel like a scenes on a prop on a news set. It's like we're not quite prepared. We're changing the set. Anyways, about a year ago, I was just reminded moments ago that a year ago, this was the time I was returning from India. That the flight actually arrived around this time, a few days before. So it's really almost a year to the date that I returned from India into a very different world than when I left Canada. And a few weeks after that, the spiritual head of the Brahma Kumaris, Daddy Genki at 104, as we say, left the body or ascended, went into another stage of operating a different part. The word dying is not an accurate word, actually. So passed away isn't actually accurate either. So left the body and went into a different role. And then this soul, Daddy Gulzar, was appointed, if we can use that word. We operate in a very odd way as a spiritual organization. There's no elections or anything. It's just clear that there should be the spiritual head. Daddy Gulzar became the spiritual head. I should have been more prepared. I could give you a picture of her at a young age. She came when she was very young, about 8, I believe. And, you know, I don't even know how to describe Daddy Gulzar because she is such a unique being. I was remembering a lot today. When I was very young in this study, it was probably just my first or second year traveling to the spiritual headquarters. And I don't know why I was traveling alone, actually, and taking the train. So I was in really a train compartment on my own. And I remember I was in there and often other BKs, as you get closer to the headquarters, the odds of other BKs, students being en route with you increases. And so another student popped his head into my cabin and said, Daddy Gulzar is on the train with us. Would you like to come and sit with her for a moment? I was so young. I was like, I don't think this is how it's supposed to happen. So I said, sure. so I suddenly found myself, it was very odd. I suddenly found myself sitting closer than Nora is right now, sitting face to face. I was on one bed. She was opposite me on the other bed, face to face with Daddy Gulzar. And that's, I just don't know how to describe it. When I say that she is one of the top 8 most remarkable beings on this planet, I am not stretching the truth. There is a vibration, a stage, a presence that there is absolutely zero, and I mean zero trace of ego. There is no trace of ego. Just this beautiful spiritual presence that really God's presence. This you can understand. I'm not saying she is God because she's not, but her connection to God is so clean and so close and so accurate that there's just this divine experience. But yet so down to earth. She's just smiling sweetly, which is what she always did. Smiling sweetly, doesn't really speak English. So there's a translator with us. I assume I said things I don't remember because all I remember is this incredible exchange through the eyes. And then the train arrived, and I remember again getting off the train, and I was alone, didn't really know the other BKs. I was very young. So I was kind of standing a little bit on my own, and she came off the train with her assistants. And of course, when a senior is traveling, she's greeted, she's given flower, and she's just sort of, they're arranging baggage, and she looks over and she sees me, and she walks over to me. And again, this incredible exchange through the eyes, and she gave me the flower. And these scenes are just so strong in my mind. They're so short. There is no words. There's no exchange of words, but there's this beautiful exchange of light, of such light feelings. So I was thinking about her a lot in this session. So she was appointed spiritual head of the organization when Daddy Genki transcended, ascended, changed roles, moved into a different sphere of activity a year ago. But Daddy Gulzar's body has always been quite frail during this past year. And so on March 11th, she ascended. She also moved on. And we were just talking about it. I don't know if any of you felt it, but the days leading up to, as well as since, we're now on the 13th, so a couple of days since, it's like this wave of calm. Some are describing it as healing, but this wave of calm, just gently, like this mist around the planet. I'm not saying she's dispersed. I'm just saying that her change in roles activated a shift. And so I think it's very beautiful to have this topic of staying light and dedicate a bit to Daddy Gulzar, if that's okay. When we think about staying light physically, again, the body being light, and respect to fitness. So everyone is obsessed in fitness, physical fitness, with their weight. Some want it to be heavier, some want it to be light. It's all very strange, but they become obsessed with the weight of the body. Is it heavy? Is it light? And they do all sorts of things. So when we think about staying light in terms of just starting with physical fitness, what sorts of things, those who are trying to go from heavy to light physically, what sort of things do they focus on? If I went to a personal trainer and said, I want to lose some weight, I want to be lighter, what would they burn calories? So there's actually a formula with respect to how the body functions, which is calories in, calories out. And if I want to get lighter, the calories in has to somehow get less than the calories. Is that right? The calories I put in need to be less than the ones I put out. So, and burning calories can help that equation as well. So there's really two things. What are the two things that souls focus on physically when they're trying to get lighter? Diet, absolutely, and activity, exercise. So diet, appropriate clothes. I love you. Appropriate clothes. Absolutely. Very good. So the biggies are the diet. So they'll look at what they're eating, the amount they're eating, the quality of what they're eating, but also the expenditure. So activity, what types of activity? So if I'm eating a lot, if I'm putting a lot of food into the body and I'm sitting, unless there's some metabolism anomaly going on, the odds are pretty big that I'm going to get big physically. So then we start to look at, okay, I'm going to change the diet and I'm going to change my activity. I don't know if souls are agreeing with this, but that's mostly in a very simple way what I have seen. There's many other factors, but that is in essence what we look at. So that's the physical. Does the same thing apply spiritually, do you think? Do you think spiritually, in terms of staying light, we're going to look at diet and activity? What do you think? Sorry. We don't think about it. All right. Well, if we were to think about it, I'm seeing Pauline nodding. So what does that mean spiritually? We know what physical diet is. We know what physical activity is, but what is for me the spiritual being, this non-physical being? What are we talking about when we say my diet, the diet of the soul, I the soul, and the activity of I the soul? What are we talking about? Oh, I need to give you means to communicate.
I think
Go ahead.
just mention about the physicality, the physical food
Yeah.
that we put into our body. The same as I think mentally, what we put into our minds, in our thoughts, in our emotions, it creates a heaviness within us.
Mm,
So the more we think, the more we worry, the more we carry the loads around us, mentally, physically, emotionally, that carries a lot of baggage and it causes heaviness in
yeah.
us, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting so many good answers. Thank you, Pauline. Yes. So the diet, we call it the diet of the mind. So the quality of those thoughts, are they heavy? I'm getting a lot of stuff here. We got knowledge in and our actions out. Beautiful, beautiful metaphor. What kind of knowledge I'm taking in and what kind of actions I'm putting out. Fantastic. And then diet and silence. Beautiful. We'll come to that because that definitely connects to Daddy Gulzar. But the diet of the mind, which Pauline described really beautifully. What else would this spiritually refer when we say diet of the soul or activity of the soul? Nora, you were sharing something.
I think our awareness which drives all the other things,
Our awareness.
our attitudes.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting thing, because sometimes I'm just remembering a lot to story. Okay, so I'm getting more stuff here. No desire, no greed, no attachment, no anger. Oh, that's easy. Check. But that's exactly what we want. And there's a word for that we call pure. So we'll come back to that. But I'm remembering a story that one of our senior students, who Sister Denise, was sharing. Again, I try and imagine these things because I've only known her since she came to the study, but apparently she was a bit larger physically in girth. She's a very small thing now, so I'm trying to imagine this. But she said that something happened very naturally, because very often physically we think about, okay, I've got to pay attention to my diet, and she says, no, I didn't do any of that. It's just I noticed that my taste changed. I just didn't seem to be using food the way I used to use it. And so it's interesting if we're talking about the diet of the mind. And we've even sometimes referred to gossip as spicy food. Who here likes spicy food? I don't. I'm going to be completely honest with you. But who likes spicy food? It's okay. Don't be shy. Yeah, it's quite common, actually. I'm weird. I'm the anomaly in most gatherings. Everybody seems to like, I like well seasoned. I'm not saying I like bland. Okay, I do like bland, but well seasoned's fine, but spicy, I don't know what the problem is. But metaphorically speaking, people love, they kind of perk up when they hear gossip. And in spirituality, we call that spicy food. We have this taste for certain kinds of thoughts, almost like we're addicted to them. And we could, if we wanted, we could, just like people do with their physical diet, we could say, okay, you've got to stop thinking that. They get very almost violent. Can't eat that. Cut it out. Right? They try and cut certain foods out. And again, we try and do that with our mind too. Stop thinking that. Right? But what's being suggested when we look at awareness instead is that as I start to, which is the very essence of how we operate, when I start to look at awareness, you might say identity or reality that I'm working with, as I start to shift things at that very deep level, what I find tasty changes. I don't really have an interest in spicy food. Now, when Dani Gulzar came to this organization at a very young age, 8, it was noticed that she had a very natural inclination. It wasn't forced. She just wasn't interested in having a lot of unnecessary thoughts, was not interested in gossip. And she wasn't in any way judgmental. It just was this very sweet way of operating. There was just no taste for her, no interest. So it said her mind remained, we say, very silent, not empty. We're not saying it was empty. it was silent. We might say very light or very pure. When it comes to physical food, if I had 2 plates of food in front of you and said, this one is made with completely pure ingredients, and this one is made with completely impure ingredients, which one would you like? What do you think? It is possible that the one made with impure looks more attractive. So you might be drawn to that. But the one is completely pure, nothing else mixed in. No preservatives, nothing. Completely pure. Go ahead.
I think it's something like smoking. People know it's bad. Or,
Yeah.
you know, certain kinds of food or certain activities in lifestyle. They know it's bad, but
Can't stop.
they can't stop.
Yeah. But and again, it's fascinating. They can try all sorts of things. And I've heard so many people with addictions, but, you know, we all have addictions, quite frankly. Say, I've tried so many things and it just doesn't work for me. And then they feel like a failure, which they're not. It's just that the shift needs to happen at quite a deep level for it to roll out very naturally. Addictions are deep and they're sustaining something in the soul. So if I can figure out what is it really feeding, and if I can get that from a different source, I would very naturally let go of the addiction. It would happen really naturally. We see this so much. So this violent method of cutting it off, don't eat this, don't do this, that we often do with our mind, don't think that, it's bad. It's very violent and it's not sustainable. Suddenly we're binging in the corner when no one's watching. Pauline, go ahead.
So I was thinking about the spicy foods. So when I was young, I was brought up in a very, very strict. So when you say bad words or if you raise your voice, I get penalized by eating spicy food. So I think that triggers when I grew up, I love spicy food. And then when I was introduced to fitness and healthy eating, I eat no salt at all and no spicy food. And I just eat plain food actually right now. And 5 years now, no spicy, not so much salt. So it's pretty interesting. And I lost interest with chips and any of those that I used to love. So I'm not sure if how can you relate that, you know, when I was young.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you get naughty and you just want to disobey your parents. So
Yeah.
as a penalty, I think that's how it started. I love spicy foods.
Yeah. No, it's incredible, almost Pavlovian conditioning, right? Sometimes it's reverse, sometimes it's direct. We never know quite how that correlation will happen. Sometimes it goes sideways and it's correlated, but the opposite of what we expected. But it is, it's always, quite frankly, when we say the word food, it comes under a category called sustenance. And there's different forms of sustenance that we could talk about. Food is one, different relationships, environments, experiences that feed us. And it's very interesting when it comes to physical food, because we even refer to certain physical foods as comfort foods. So that's when we know it's starting to overlap with some deeper needs. We might say emotional or even spiritual needs. We're looking for some kind of sustenance. In this case, comfort, some feeling of being okay, of being nourished or nurtured. And we're trying to get it through physical food. But we are spiritual beings. Now, then this conditioning can happen every time I, okay, true confession. Well, it's not that I feel sustained, but there is a lot of chocolate eating that happens. Every time I eat chocolate, there's a certain experience. It's not just a physical experience. There's something else that might be going on. So what we look at with spirituality is we look at who is being sustained. And there's 2 choices. And that's why I refer to this beautiful state that Daddy had of no ego. This is really powerful because ego has these two aspects. It wants a certain diet and it likes to perform certain activity. and it will inevitably make us heavy. So what kind of thoughts does ego like to have? What kind of diet does ego have? It is very spicy, by the way.
Critical
Critical,
comparison.
comparing, competing, and sometimes very self-deprecatory, can implode sometimes. So, just taking superiority, absolutely. Looking at the diet and, it gives, we say, oh, I feel horrible having that thought, but somehow it's satisfying something. It's like we feel kind of split personality or something. Like, what, this love-hate thing going on? Like, why am I indulging? We actually were indulging in that kind of thought. And yet a part of me doesn't want to do that. I don't want to feel better by putting someone else down. Like I know even in my heart that isn't a great way to feel better about myself, but I can't, it like gives us a hit. So we're in this weird love-hate relationship, this diet. And what's happening is that ego is being fed by those thoughts. So it's saying, this is great, this feels good. But me, the spiritual being trapped inside, I'm saying, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't make me feel good about me. This is eroding my self-respect. So ego's getting fat and I am starving inside. It's a very strange situation. And what kind of activity does ego like? This again, I found very, very interesting. Well, let me help you out by stating that question a little bit differently. What is ego's relationship with activity?
Creates conflict.
It's conflict?
Yeah, it creates conflict and misunderstanding.
Mm. How many get up in the morning? Well, it might be different now since my idea is the best, absolutely. So in terms of interactions, this idea of superiority again, that my idea is the best, but ego gets such a hit from acting, period. It just loves to do. Look at all I'm doing. Look at what I've done. Look at what I've accomplished. It loves to do. So yes, we're landing up with a heavy and not pure diet. We're landing up with a lot of sedentariness. And you're thinking, what? It's so funny because we have one of the classic ways that ego shows up is called laziness. And what we're talking about when we say activity, and this is a really important thing to know, there's something called time. It is our greatest treasure, time and thoughts. Thoughts refers to the diet. Time refers to activity. It is huge treasure. Most of us now think time is hours, minutes, days, months. Correct? This is a man-made invention. These hours, minutes, days, whatever, it's man-made. Time means what choices I am making at any given moment. And then we really pushed it to the limit. We have stress. We say, I have deadlines, I have timelines, I have, this things I have to get done by this date. This is all ego thinking. But when a soul is engaging, and then we say that one of the forms that ego takes is laziness. And souls will say, how can you say I'm lazy? I'm busy doing so many things. And yet we feel so tired and so unenergized, sometimes unhappy, stressed, very heavy. But you can't say I'm lazy. I'm busy doing so many things, but activity is supposed to make one light. So when ego is doing the activity, driving the activity, when it's ego's relationship with activity, feeding the image, looking at outcomes and results, we get very, very heavy. That is, ego gets bigger and bigger. Right? And I've got to get this done by this time, and time. I don't have enough time, and and I used to always find it so fascinating when I look at someone like Daddy Gulzar. I don't think most of us were even aware that she actually had administrative duties. Because anytime you saw her, she was just like kind of floating around, floating or sitting. Or I just heard a lovely story that in Delhi, when she was there, she would be, sitting outside in the sun, and her stage, again, that egoless, light, pure state, was such that people enjoyed her presence, but they weren't really pulled to come into conversation. They kind of would leave her in that, at peace. They just didn't really bother her. And so she didn't push anyone away, nothing. That is not, she's not capable of that. But it was amazing how that egoless state created very beautiful interactions. And yet there was no heaviness. There was no sense of, how am I going to see all these people? How am I going to talk to all these people? There was none of that. And I find it just fascinating that we're talking about the diet and the activity of when there's ego, this awareness of I am Judy, who has these roles and responsibilities and this image to uphold and this reputation or whatever, versus I am a soul. And what is the diet? What kind of diet and activity do I, the soul, like to engage in? And yes, I, the soul, like a pure diet. We had a beautiful sharing in our class this morning. We call it a blessing, Vardan. Beautiful. It was about seeing the specialities of others. A soul with self-respect or a pure awareness. I am a soul. I have these innate qualities. I am unique, one of a kind. You cannot compare apples and oranges. One of a kind means there's no one you can compare me to. We each are more special than the next. Very, very pure feelings. I will start to see others, not their weaknesses, not comparing them as if we are both oranges. I'll just see them as one of a kind. And I don't feel that seeing their specialities in any way takes away from my own. Very pure. Now, when we actually start to think this way about people, and when we start to see every situation as beneficial, have pure feelings, we actually start to naturally become light, very peaceful, a sense of freedom. That same freedom, let's say that you've got a lot of stuff on your plate and lots of deadlines. And what it feels like when someone comes along and says, you know what, I'll do that for you. You don't have to do that. I'll take that off your plate. We feel this like, a sigh of relief. It doesn't happen at all. They just add things to the plate. But the point being that feeling, I remember that feeling of, when the soul left the body. That light, it was like, it was no longer just contained in that body. It was just the vibration, just a wave of relief. And it has the tasks are all still there, actually. It was quite interesting to watch. The tasks are all still there. So first there's this pure way of thinking where if it's based on so much contentment, so much self-respect, and such an unlimited understanding, which we call truth. Really important, those three aspects. This is the ingredients for pure thinking. Contentment, self-respect, unlimited understanding, eternal understanding or truth. This fuels pure thinking, but also the activity. And this is the big thing. This is the big one. So Daddy Gulzar's specialty was silence. And when I came into this study very young, the blessing that I read that has stayed with me and is still, just read it before coming down here into this session. When you learn to balance silence and activity, you will be powerful. So I, the soul, I master silence. It's not that I step away from activities, but I marry that silence, that freedom. We call it liberation in life, that sense that I don't need certain things to happen. I don't need to be recognized. I don't need to, if it doesn't get done on time and, you know, people no longer like me, it's okay. Right? This real deep sense of being sustained through silence and marrying that to my activities. So silence activity is really, really what makes the soul light. The term that we use in this study is karma yoga. Being a karma yogi, that is performing actions whilst in a state of yoga. And we've mentioned that silence does not mean emptiness, otherwise we'd use the word emptiness. But in this practice, silence means I am experiencing what resides in that silence, which is truth or what is eternal. I'm very connected to my eternal state, and I'm very connected to my eternal parent, the Supreme Soul. And this really creates this incredible freedom as I come into action. I'm liberated from ego as I come into action. I stay intact as I come into action. So now I'm performing action in a very different state, and it actually makes me light. Now, we saw this a lot with the first students of the organization, is they accomplished so much. And, you know, you're thinking, I don't know, I feel it was a bit of a disappointment when the next generations came along and just seemed more tired. Because, you know, we look at the first student, Brahma Baba, who's like 80s, 90s, you know, and his activity levels are remarkable and yet so light. You know, I look at the senior students and so light. I was 1 year, this really blew me away. I was 1 year at our retreat center on the West Coast, Anabuti, and we arrived, and it was a big program. I think a major senior. I wonder if it was, I don't know if it was Daddy Gul, some major, anyways, it doesn't matter, but they had to fit a lot of us into this retreat place, which is designed for, I think, about 30 or 40, but there was a whole lot more was there. So they were doubling us up in the room. And there were 4 of us, I believe, in a room for 2. And so it was myself and my physical sister, and then there was 2 others in the room who had arrived earlier to help, and they were both senior students, and I think they're both in their 70s. And one of them, we hadn't arrived yet, so there are beds in the room. There are actually 3 beds in the room, so it must have been a room for 3. One of them had chosen, and she had just had a hip operation just a little while back. She chose to sleep on the floor and keep the beds free for us. We are the junior students. You know, they should be the ones who get those facilities. But also, she just had a hip operation. Getting up and down off the floor, like she's just sleeping on a foamy on the floor. The other one, I mean, I would kill myself laughing. Raj is her name, which means king. She was in the kitchen. If you're given kitchen duty at these retreats, You are going from very, very early morning to very, very late at night on your feet nonstop. She was in the kitchen, Rod. She's in her 70s. And then I'd see her in the room after, and we were killing ourselves laughing. I mean, she was so light and so tireless. I mean, it is exhausting. Trust me, I've been in the kitchen for maybe an hour or two. I'm like, oh my God, I need a nap. You know, she was, I would just look at her like, what are you on? And of course, she's on remembrance of God is what she's on. But I just remember that feeling of she's doing something right. She's a real karma yogi, always behind the scene, getting no recognition, always supporting us. Like I was so touched by these souls, always supporting us, always putting us in front. You know, it was just embarrassing actually, but it was like I'd be looking at them going, wow, you know, you're doing actions right, and that you're staying so light, so tireless. It was just remarkable. It was that silence. You know, we think of little children who just can run and run and run and run all day, and with that purity. That purity, they are free from desires, expectations, judgment. They are integrating that pure silence, those pure feelings into everything they do. So staying light isn't about, I need to get things off my plate, or I need to go into a cave where there's no people around, and then I'll be light. But in the midst of everything, I need to look at the purity of my diet. That is, what is my awareness? Am I feeding ego, or am I feeding myself? I, the soul. What types of thoughts? Because when we say, I don't understand, I'm somewhat satisfied when I, you know, criticize someone, but I'm also not very happy. That tells me it's a bit like there's a parasite in there that is very happy and I am basically starving. So what feeds me? What feeds the image? Being very clear. And then with activity that keeps me light, rather than, oh, I'm doing so much and I'm tired, but am I doing it in that state of silence, of being connected to a very extremely light experience, my eternal state and my eternal parent? Am I doing activities in that state? And what I know made it so easy for these students is they always had the awareness. What made that connection natural, karma yoga natural, is they always had the awareness, I am an instrument for God. Whatever I'm doing, I am an instrument for God. And thinking about, what is God's task? What sorts of things is God hoping will happen? You know, does God need a lot of money? You know, does God need name, fame, recognition? No, the way God's heart works is, what would benefit souls, not even bodies? What would benefit souls? What creates well-being for souls? You know, so as we think about this soul, I think they were just so, it's amazing the choices they made, how they used their time, always feeling, I am an instrument for God. I receive so much from God. So there's no loss, but as an instrument for God, what benefit, spiritual benefit, can I bring to this planet? And I know there were many, many messages sent at her passing from major dignitaries in India, from the prime minister and president on down. And I was reading them, and every single one referred to her absolute lifelong commitment to the upliftment of humanity. That was it. So they're really deeply affected by her passing. But amazing how light, huge responsibilities on her head. She had huge responsibilities in her role, and yet always was so light, you know, because always the feeling, I am an instrument for God. And God's task, God's purpose is so aligned with what makes us very happy, not to put down our fellow man, but to uplift. So we're happy and we're light because we're just the instrument, right? God's responsible. So really taking time to think, this is the beauty of these days, is we have opportunity to reflect. We're in different contexts now. We're not just caught up in the hamster wheel. We can stand back a bit and reflect. What is my diet? Am I really feeding me, the soul? And is my activity really connected to spirituality, to silence? So somehow the time flew by. I'm going to end there, but I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts to share.
When you're sharing about, what diet is good for the body, and I wonder how often we know it's apparent when it comes to me, the soul, because I don't even know if it's obvious for the body when we have the kind of activity and physical diet that we have, but I guess it was making me think again, what is pure? Is of how you can, I'm really nice, I'm good with this person, and how that can actually be an illusion. And why isn't anyone nice back to me?
Right.
So
there's a little
the illusion.
desire in there. No, it's true. I was driving in the car. I was the one driving. I wasn't even, it was someone else. They weren't even the one driving. I'm driving. And so I'm driving the car and there's someone beside me. And I think I let someone in and they didn't even wave at you. They didn't even wave to acknowledge the fact that I'm like, okay, first off, I'm the one driving, so it's okay. But yes, these little desires. So we want really pure diet, not artificially pure. And that's tricky in the store, isn't it? Because they can put that pure label on just about anything and really we don't know. But the real pure will always be connected to truth. So then I don't have to sort. And the truth is very simple. I always enjoy the stories about some of our senior brothers and sisters, Jagdish Bai, Mama, who said they didn't like spicy food at all. They're very respectful if they were served it, but they liked very plain food, very plain, calm food. And I know Mama, was so good at this pure diet of the mind, but this simple diet based on just 3 ingredients, thoughts about being a soul. How many of our thoughts during the day are thoughts connected to I am a soul? Just to understand that experience of being a soul, not the body. I am eternal, the body's not. All of these things. I am seated, present here in the forehead, the body, all these thoughts. This is incredibly powerful diet. Then I don't have to worry about, is it nice? Is it not? Like, it's not even, it's just, am I really having it? And then of course, the connection to God, really getting right. That's gotten to be a very mixed up diet. Very, it's a bit like different authorities say today, oatmeal's good for you. And tomorrow they say oatmeal's bad for you. You should really eat more carrots. Like, I don't know, there's so many different authorities and there's so many different ideas around God. But if I can get that first idea, I am a soul, genuinely happening, I think it starts to clarify. Then what is God? God must be a soul too, if it's my parent, right? If that being is my parent and I am a soul, then that being must also be a soul. And we say we are in the image of God. Maybe we got our own image wrong, because then we start to try and put God into a physical form. But what is he, Chinese? Is he black? Is he Arabic? I mean, what is he? Which form should I put him in? Is he male? Is he female? And then it gets very politically correct. Don't say he, it's a she. Maybe it. He, she. It gets very messy. So I think as long as we think we're physical bodies, we'll never understand God, because we'll just keep pulling him into this limited physical kind of state and the personality of a physical. So, but if it's like, okay, I'm in the image of God, but wait a minute, maybe I got my form wrong. So if his form is of being incorporeal, a soul, just being, this beautiful, subtle point of spiritual energy, I must have the same form. This is a being who, because of not having that image, the body, we say beyond an image, no ego, no desire, no attachment, no greed. So what is the person? If I take away all of those things that are rampant in us now, so it's very difficult to project, that won't work. But if I take those away, what kind of personality is left? What is that? One who has self-respect, no desires. So we say God wants this. That is not consistent with a being that has no vices, right? Or God prefers this team to that team. That makes no sense. Or if I don't do this, God will be angry at me, but God does not have anger. So I am projecting my stuff onto that being. So I need to get out of this to really understand what that being is like. So really, that's a very beautiful way to spend the mind, is to kind of come out of those old ways of thinking, that old diet around God, experience myself to be a soul, and then explore the relationship with God in that spiritual way. And then finally, of course, the third idea is how we think about scenes and situations around us. We just don't have the proper lens to process what's going on around us. So we think about it in a very heavy way. But if we could stand back a bit, and yes, it's about the law of karma, but understanding sometimes karma has been compared to a mother. Karma is always trying to bring us back to that pure original state. So whatever is going on at any given time, yes, it is the consequence of past actions, but it's also, as I move away from my original state, my actions become more and more, we use the term degraded or lack of integrity. So of course the consequences are also going to be further and further away from that original state. So knowing whatever's going on, it's just feedback that I've moved away from who I am. That's all it is. So as I get closer, then I'm really at peace with whatever is going on around me. So really thinking about things from a different perspective is a very powerful diet. And then we don't have to get into, oh, I have to have a nice thought for this person. I think those types of thoughts come naturally when we digest these very pure thoughts. We just think properly about scenes and situations and other people. Were you going to share? I wasn't sure. Okay.
Not particularly, but
Okay.
it's just, I think, how much do I trust that which is pure?
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to sort of output. And so I find that the session is very thought-provoking.
Yeah. No, it's really going down to the basic ingredients, of when we're looking at cooking something, we look at the quality of the basic ingredients. We even look at the space we're cooking in, and that's really what we want to drill down to rather than this sort of surface approach to food. But what is my awareness? That's always the place to start, to know if a thought is really pure. Well, was I in an ego place, or was I in a soul conscious or self-respectful place when I created that thought? Not looking to thought, but it was such a nice thought. But I wasn't really in a self-respectful place.
I think on that note, just seeing Misty Copeland or hearing when you mentioned about ballet dancers, just love just focusing on the basics. I feel like when it's at that point, then it's just a moot conversation, because if you're enjoying what you do, really, if you really are, you really don't care. And just because for those who weren't aware about the 7 billion acts of goodness, it became a conversation. What is a good act? If we're focusing for those who know about this initiative, it's can I focus on my awareness? So that drives things.
Mm.
But then
Mm.
there was also, or do I just do what, acts of kindness?
Mhm.
And I guess it boils down to what feeds you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We have a lovely saying sometimes in our morning classes. It says, how much does your stomach need? Can you live off of 1, 2 chapatis a day? Or how about just dal and roti? These are very basic. Now, the secret question is, how much does your stomach really need? And it's classically known that this is the area where ego is housed. In the scriptures, it says the missiles will emerge from the stomach. That this is really where it hits you when there's self-respect issues. You usually, the fluttering in the stomach or the nervousness, etc. So how much, how much does the soul, do I need? Like I can survive on such pure, simple thoughts. That's all I need. Pure, simple thoughts. When I'm in the right awareness, all I have a taste for is pure, simple thoughts, thoughts connected to the truth, to what is eternal. So automatically, as I look at someone else, without even saying anything or doing anything, when I look at someone else, I will see them as a soul. So yes, I could have very nice thoughts about other people, but not see them as a soul. So I always want to check at the deepest level, how am I operating? So I'm looking at the time. I have no idea what the topic is next week. I know what the last month is because I want the one on the last of the month because I'm very excited about that. But I have no idea. Sorry. Oh well, it'll be a surprise. Oh, spring in your step. A spring in your step because it's around the spring equinox. So spring in your step. Very exciting. You can practice during the week. What does that mean? Anyways, we'll end there with a little reflection, a reminder that on Sunday, every Sunday this month, as we look at the significance of Shivaratri, the night of Shiva, Shiva is the name for Supreme Soul, we're looking at different points of personality of the Supreme Soul, so the heart of God. So we had Eternal Healer on past Sunday, and you'll have to come this Sunday to know what the topic is. I actually don't know at this point. So anyways, every Sunday, 6:30 to 7:30, a meditation looking at illumination of God's heart. So ending with a reflection. It's remarkable how little I, the soul, need to feel content. Physically, I try to surround myself with possessions and relationships and facilities and stimuli, temporary stuff. And then my mind becomes filled with worries over maintaining all those things. But what actually sustains me, the soul? Even a second experience of pure love, of true self-respect, just a drop. It goes so deeply into the self. It feels like an ocean. For the sake of the self and my own well-being, even while still having all those possessions, facilities, relationships, stuff, not pushing any of it away, but looking very deeply inside. What feeds me, the soul? I probably can only find that in silence. The nutrients one finds in silence that can feed me, the soul. That will be my focus this coming week, to explore what feeds the soul, what feeds me, and can I find it in true silence? Om Shanti. Thank you so much for joining today. Your presence, your contribution is so lovely. And yes, we will meet again next week, perhaps. Om Shanti.